Frostbite.Studios. As of right now, she's hands down one of my favorite artists. The first time I saw her work, I remember just staring at it and wanting nothing more than to understand how she did it. And after a bit of studying and some trial and error, and a few requests from you all asking for a tutorial, I think I'm finally ready to share my thoughts about it. And a quick process of what I think her workflow is like. But just a quick disclaimer though, I've only been doing art for a little over a year and a half, so I'm not a professional by any means. Anything said in this video is strictly opinion and based off my own observations. If you want to jump straight into the study, feel free to skip to the timestamp on the screen. But if you're curious about the observations I made along the way, stick around for a bit, and I'll keep the breakdown quick, I promise. In my eyes, Frostbite's style is painterly and intentionally messy, but in a controlled way. That's honestly what makes it so appealing to me, because it strikes a perfect balance between polished and unpolished, and which is something I really admire and honestly want for my own work one day. Her line work isn't always clean, but is confident, sketchy, loose, and expressive. You'll notice areas where she thickens her lines, especially around the clothes or certain areas like the jawlines of her characters, and other places where lines stay thin, like the hair or facial details. She also plays with line color, switching between darker tones and medium reds depending on the area. That variation gives her drawings extra life without over-rendering anything. On her Instagram, she actually posted a brush list a few years ago, about 5 years, but her art style hasn't really changed all that much, so I think it's a solid reference if you're trying to replicate her look. Personally, I only used a couple, the syrup brush for my rough sketch and the dry ink for my liner. Just from observing her work though, I can tell she probably uses a soft airbrush for gradients and a round hard brush for blocking and shadows, folds, and other general shapes. Her brushwork stays simple, in my opinion. Her backgrounds are usually minimal as well, with either flat colors or abstract patterns or a more like card-like feel, like a tarot card almost, with a frame, which it helps directs attention to the character and keeps the composition clean. But every once in a while she'll drop a fully rendered background, but that's a little bit more rare from what I see in her works. When it comes to rendering, I'd say her approach is as simple as it is complex. Not everything is fully rendered, and that's very intentional. You'll notice that areas like the clothes or the hair often remain a little rough, while the face is where she focuses most of her detail. Even then, the hair isn't rendered strand by strand. It's a shape first, then a few highlights or strokes, and that's it. Yet somehow it ends up looking amazing in every piece. After looking through enough of her work, I came up with a general process I think she follows. A rough sketch to lay down the composition, line art with varied thickness, which is thinner in the faces and hair, but thicker for the clothes and accessories, flats, sometimes with soft gradients, skin tints and subtle color overlays, soft shadows, hard shadows, and lighting when needed, and finally refining and adjusting line color or thickness and adding those finishing touches. It's a workflow that leaves plenty of room for expression, with nothing ever feeling overworked, but nothing feels unfinished either. It's right in that perfect middle ground. For this particular study, I decided to try recreating her drawing of Lord Rouben from the Crow Prince series by Holly Black. I don't usually draw side profiles, so I figured it would be a fun challenge, and honestly, I find this man to be gorgeous, so who wouldn't want to recreate him? I started with the syrup brush for my rough sketch. Once I liked the base, I moved into the line art using the dry ink brush, but as I worked, I realized I was missing that sketchy feeling that her art has, so I merged my rough sketch and my line art together, lowered the opacity of the sketch, and cleaned it up further. But even though it looks like a mess with the colors right now, I ended up tweaking those colors later on and adjusting as I went. Once that was done, I started laying down the flats, and one thing I noticed during this phase is that Frostbite doesn't just lay base colors. She'll also add lip color, blush, and subtle cool tones to the face. You'll often see a hint of yellow around the forehead and a light blue tint near the chin or jawline, I think she uses a soft airbrush for those gradients and keeps the opacity pretty low. Her color palette leans towards desaturated tones, especially for pale skinned characters, but in some pieces, she'll use more saturated colors, just never too saturated. It's always well balanced. But for this piece in particular, the color palette that I'm going along is fairly desaturated, just like the reference. After flats, I added soft shadows and skin gradients, plus some gradient work in the hair and clothing. You'll notice I tend to bounce around during this part and just all over the place. It's just how I work, but overall I followed the process I mentioned earlier. Soft shadows first, then hard shadows. Even though this was a style study, I still want to keep a little bit of my own style present. So while it doesn't look exactly like hers, I tried to channel the structure and logic behind her art. Her faces lean more semi-realistic and mature, unless she's drawing younger characters like Baby Oak, for example. But my style is a little bit more, I don't know what you'd call it. Not anime, but maybe manhwa? I'm not too sure. I'm still figuring it out. And I know the colors you see now that I'm laying down could feel a little bit warm compared to the reference, but don't worry, I adjusted them later on to balance things out. Now, rendering was definitely a challenge for me. In general, I struggle with rendering, and Frostbite has this way of blending some areas and then just leaving visible brush strokes in others, almost like texture or emphasis. For someone like me who's used to smoother rendering, that contrast threw me off at first, especially in the hair and clothes, because I struggle most with hair and clothes versus faces. I felt like things got a little chaotic there, but overall I was still happy with how things turned out. From there, I just kept refining, adjusting line art colors, tweaking thickness, overlapping a few areas, and then still keeping that loose feel. I didn't want to over clean it. There's honestly no perfect way to describe how I render. It's just a mix of visual cues from the reference and trying to keep shading aligned with basic face and body planes. That being said, I do think I could have handled the face shading a little bit better. I was probably too focused on the hair and clothes since I knew that would be the hardest part for me, so I spent most time on those versus the face and the skin. The whole thing took a while, and when I look back at the Procreate time-lapse, I had spent just under 6.5 hours total. But to be fair, it was spread out across a few days, and I didn't have time to sit and do it all in one go, unfortunately, so that's another reason why I think this style study is a little bit, I guess, unpolished. But after a few last-minute tweaks and some detail work and throwing a noise filter over the whole thing, this was the final result. And honestly, I'm happy with it. There's always stuff I could improve, and yeah, some brush blobs might look a little weird up close, but I feel like I captured the vibe I was going for, and I still got to sneak a little bit of me into the process. But if you like how this turned out, let me know with a like or a comment down below, and tell me your thoughts or on who you'd like to see me study next. I have a few artists in mind, but I'm open to suggestions. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps out more than you know. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.